Hello again, everyone. I'm Lucas Berry, and you're watching Train Time on the New River Network. Goodness gracious, it's been hot out here this summer, hasn't it? Oh boy, I tell you what, I haven't been able to get out as much because I don't do well in heat. So for me, this is almost a non-starter when it comes to standing up by a railroad track for hours waiting on a coal train. I love coal trains, I don't love heat. So we'll kind of get more into it as the temperature hopefully comes back down from where it's been. But I did manage to get out some over the course of the summer, and I filmed a couple trains. Like I said, it's not near as much as I would under normal circumstances over the summer, but you know what? You take what you get, right? We've got a heritage unit and a rerouted freight train in this episode, as well as a coal train that I'm going to call Peak Appalachian. You'll see what I mean when we get to that shot. Just hang tight. You'll see why I call it Peak Appalachia. We've also got a flashback that I did back in some of the archives to kind of fill this episode out, but it all ties together, so it all works out just fine. So without further ado, let's get going and get me out of this heat during this introduction. And let's get started. Here's this episode of Train Time with Lucas Berry on the New River Network. Our first train is M409, a daily manifest from Selkirk, New York near Albany to Waycross, Georgia, a little northwest of Jacksonville, Florida. M409 normally comes west out of Selkirk across upstate New York before turning south through Pittsburgh, Cumberland, Maryland, and the Carolinas. For some reason that I really can't recall ever finding out for sure, CSX ran this train and counterpart M410 through West Virginia over the week of July 4th. I thought Thurman would be a fun place to catch it, so there I went, and not long after the train showed up.
Road Thurman, 213 East, Main to 2.
This is the shot I would call peak Appalachia, because I filmed it from a Dollar General parking lot. I was on the way to Charleston and I had the scanner going knowing I was following the railroad. I heard an eastbound calling signals at Chesapeake and I got off as soon as I could. Turns out that was the Dollar General in Shillian. After a few minutes of waiting, here came R272, a loaded coal train that will eventually end up in Newport News, Virginia. And they'll be stopping in Handley for a crew change. I only know that because I passed the crew van waiting for him while I drove through Handley. Sometimes you just luck into a train like I did in late September 2023, again down at Shillian, and another coal train just happened to be on its way east. fast forward to 2025, and about a week after that initial shot here, when I was on the way to Charleston, I got word that CSX's Seaboard Coastline Heritage Unit was coming east on a coal train. And before we get to that train, let me learn you a little bit about the SCL. The Seaboard Coastline was formed in 1967 as a merger of the Atlantic Coastline and the Seaboard Airline. The two roads followed similar routes from Richmond through the Carolinas into Florida and Birmingham, Alabama, with the Seaboard running a little more inland than the coastline into Florida and taking a more northerly course in Alabama. Still, it made sense for both to combine their routes into one railroad. They were both coming from a place of decent strength, and the combined road would be that much stronger. The SCO would go on to become the backbone of the Family Line system, with the Seaboard Coastline Industries owning the L&N, the Clinchfield, Atlanta and West Point, and the Georgia Railroad. All that became the Seaboard system, which is the S in CSX. I'll say again that I like CSX's design for their heritage units, but the SCO may be the only one I want to see in full heritage paint, because as you can see here, under the cab window it says "Pulling for You." That would have been a nice touch to add to a modern locomotive. I went to Hawks Nest because I wanted kind of an overhead, really put it in its scene kind of deal, because the SCL, yes, it did have grades, but it wasn't a big mountain railroad. This is mountain territory. I wanted to have that black against the mountains. But I almost missed the train. I got here with seconds to spare. I didn't get the shot I really wanted, but I didn't come away empty-handed either, so I guess I'll take it. This wasn't the first time I got the SCL, but it's my best shot of it so far. I hope it hangs around a little bit and I can finally get a good ground level shot. The first shot came about a week or so after it was painted, as the engine got into coal service in a rather interesting way. It came into Russell, Kentucky on a manifest from Waycross, Georgia, not M409, I think it was M692. I think, don't quote me on that. Anyway, it was taken to South Charleston Yard, where it was spent the night before going to Winifred Junction near Chesapeake to get a train from the Big Eagle Railroad. They don't use CSX power for their coal trains, so when CSX gets a train from them, they gotta bring their own power. I found myself in Shillian waiting for it, ironically at that same Dollar General. I didn't plan it, it just happened. Anyway, someone parked in the curb right in front of the shot, so up the line we go toward Hanley, eventually settling near East Bank. I was all set to get what I thought would be a half-decent shot of the thing until I heard another train coming. It was L212, at the time a daily manifest from Clifton Forge, Virginia to Russell, Kentucky. So I switched sides of the track so as to not get blocked if the SCL showed up. It didn't end up being a problem, but that's the risk you take in double-track territory, being on the wrong side of a meet or a close call like this. Anyway, here's L212. And less than a minute later, I timed it out, it's less than a minute, shows up Seaboard Coastline Heritage number 1967 leading a coal train for Newport News, Virginia. What we all came down here to see. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the program and would like to watch past episodes, I invite you to do so on our Facebook page at New River Network. You can check us out on YouTube, also at New River Network, our Roku channel, New River Network. WatchNRN.com, it's our website. You can watch exactly what's being shown on New River Network at that time. And you can check us out on cable here in Fayette County, Channel 4 on the Plateau, Channel 17 down in the valley. So, one more time for the New River Network, I'm Lucas Ferry. Now to give it any time, it's train time.